Ha, Madri, Suresh, is it audible?
Leader. Myself, Parveen Kausaryalgi, PhD research scholar. A very good morning to all honorable dignitaries, resource person, and participant. I take this privilege to warmly welcome all our dignitaries, resource person, and participants to the inaugural function of 2 days virtual international conference on economic empowerment of women, global issues and challenges, organized by Department of Economics, Karnataka State, Akkamahadevi Women's University, Vijaypur. We have received overwhelming responses across India, 172 papers. So those are published in the edited book also. So prayer is not asking, prayer is putting oneself in the hands of God. I request prayer team of music department of our university. Over to you.
ಹೌದು ಮೇಡಮ್. ಇಲ್ಲ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅದು ಮೇಡಮ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಒಂದು ದಿನಕ್ಕೂ ಅದನ್ನ ಎಲ್ಲ ಅದು ಹಾಂ ಎಸ್
ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ರಾಜ್ಯ ಅಕ್ಕಮಹಾದೇವಿ ಮಹಿಳಾ ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾನಿಲಯದ ಪತ್ರಿಕೋದ್ಯಮ ಮತ್ತು ಸಮೂಹ ಸಂವಹನ ವಿಭಾಗ
ಹಾಗೂ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಅಧ್ಯಯನ ವಿಭಾಗದ ವತಿಯಿಂದ
ಆನ್ಲೈನ್ ಮೂಲಕ ಸ್ಪೋಕನ್ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ತರಬೇತಿ,
ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತನಾಡುವುದು,
ವಾಕ್ಯ ರಚನೆ ಮಾಡುವುದು,
ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ವ್ಯಾಕರಣ,
ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಭಾಷೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ನಿರೂಪಣೆ ಮಾಡುವುದು
ಹೀಗೆ ಹಲವು ವಿಷಯಗಳ ಕುರಿತು ಸ್ಪೋಕನ್ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ತರಬೇತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅನುಭವ
To honor, to welcome is to establish integrity. I request Dr. R.V. Gangshetty sir, convener and chairman, Department of Economics, Karnataka State, Akkamahadevi Women's University, Vijaypur. Over to you, sir. Unmute, sir. Unmute, sir. Gangshetty sir.
Good morning, one and all. It gives me immense pleasure for the inauguration of today's virtual international conference on economic empowerment of women, global issues and challenges, organized by the Department of Economics, Karnataka State Akkamahadevi Women's University, Vijaypura, India. As a chairman, Department of Economics, it's my duty to welcome all the dignitaries and all the participants from various nations. It gives me a great honor to welcome the president of this inaugural function, Professor Omkar Kakade, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Karnataka State Akkamahadevi Women's University, Vijayapura, for presiding over the function. On behalf of the Department of Economics, on behalf of the university, on behalf of all the participants, and on my personal behalf, I welcome you, sir. Dear professional friends, it's great honor, and I am very much delighted to welcome great scholar, chief guest, and keynote speaker, Professor Rania Lampu, STEM instructor, neuroeducational researcher, Directorate of Educational Technology and Innovation, Greek, Ministry of Education and Religious Affairs, Greek. We thought that she is the right chief guest and keynote speaker for this 2 days virtual international conference. I, on behalf of the Department of Economics, on behalf of the university, on behalf of all the participants, and on my personal behalf, I welcome you, Professor Rania Lampu Madamji. Friends, for the success of any event, we should have to great motivation and support from the authorities. For this, I wish to welcome from my bottom of heart to the guest of honors of today, virtual international conference, Professor R. Sunandamma, Registrar, Karnataka State Akkamahadevi Women's University, Vijayapura, who stood firm along with us for the conduct of this 2 days virtual international conference. At the same time, I wish to welcome Professor P.G. Tarsar sir, Registrar. I wholeheartedly welcome to the chairperson of the technical session of the 2 days virtual international conference, Professor B.K. Tulsimala, Registrar, Vijayanagara, Sri Krishna Devaraya University, Ballari, India. Professor C.K. Dagankar, Additional Chief Evaluation Officer, Karnataka Evaluation Authority, Planning Department, Government of Karnataka, Bengaluru, India. Dr. M. Chaitra, Professor of Economics, Madurai Kamaraj University, Madurai, Tamil Nadu. Professor Binu Thomas, Dean and Professor of Sikkim Professional University, Gangtok, Sikkim. Dr. B. of Commerce, Manomananya Sundar Nar University, Tamil Nadu. Dr. Jagrati Deshmane, Professor of Agriculture Economics, Agriculture Science University, Raichur, Karnataka, India. I also welcome convener of this conference, Dr. D.M. Madri and Dr. Suresha KP, Organizing Secretary, for putting effort to the organization of 2 days virtual international conference. I also welcome to all the session reporters. Last but the least, I welcome all the participants, research scholars, and students, ICT and media friends. I wholeheartedly welcome you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you, one and all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for welcoming all. आए हमारी महफिल में तुम कुछ इस तरह कि हर तरफ चांद तारे झिलमिलाने लगे, देख कर दिल उनको झूमने लगा, सबके मन जैसे खिलखिलाने लगे. Once again, I take this privilege to introduce our chief guest and keynote speaker, Professor Rania Lampo ma'am. Rania Lampo ma'am is a STEAM instructor and ICT teacher trainer in Greece. She is currently working at a Greek Ministry of Education as the Director of Educational Technology and Innovation. She has been awarded many national and international prizes, 25. She is a Global Teacher Prize finalist 2019, finalist and Global Teacher Award 2020 winner. Congratulations, ma'am. She is also the chairperson of Greece of Ladies of All Nations International. She has been recently awarded the title the Distinguished Educator 2020 by the Education Leaders Awards 2020. Once again, congratulations, ma'am. She is also a passionate researcher on cognitive psychology and cognitive neurosciences. She has a postgraduate degree in a language teaching related to a cognitive neuroscience. She is a founder and international coordinator of 4 innovative international projects that focus on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and described in the 2030 agenda. She promotes STEAM vision by introducing STEAM in astronomy and physics projects and combines STEAM with language and teaching. She is also author of scientific books for kids. She has presented her research work in numerous international conferences and e-conferences. She has published and research papers in various journals. So now I request Organizing Secretary of this international conference, Dr. KP Suresha Sir, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, Karnataka State Akkamahadevi Women's University, Vijaypur, to deliver introductory speech about the conference.
Good morning, everyone. Respected dignitaries who are in virtual mode, and behalf of Karnataka State Akkamahadevi Women's University, Vijaypur, Department of Economics, I have the proud privilege to welcome you all to the 2-day virtual international conference on economic empowerment of women, global issues and challenges. I feel glad to brief you all about this 2 days virtual international conference. The significance of this program is promote new ideas, thoughts, and among the economists, policymakers, experts, and also to analyze and understand the need for the transdisciplinary research in the current discussing concept about economic empowerment of women, issues and challenges in global area. We have received overwhelming responses from different universities, colleges, faculties, scholars, and various practitioners of research in the state and country. We have received more than 178 papers and abstracts. Finally, we have reviewed, the committee has finalized 121 full papers and abstract, including abstract and for presenting and publication this virtual conference. All round, dear friends, all round development and harmonious growth of nation would be probable only when women are considered as equal partners in the growth along with men. Nevertheless, in the most developing countries, women have a low socio-financial status. In such countries, successful empowerment of women is necessary to connect the human labor in the major flow of economic development. Empowerment is the method of enabling or authorizing entity to feel, perform, and get achievement in the middle work in the independent way. So women's economic empowerment is the top priority in the work to reduce the poverty. Women must be viewed just men are economic actors as well as abuse and necessary agent of change. Women economic empowerment is the transformational process in which women gain increased access to and power to economic asset and economic decision, taking into account inequality and discrimination, and they are experienced by different women is crucial to secure progress. Much of women have paid work remains informal and high precarious. Women's economic empowerment cannot be achieved while a significant gender gap in women paid and unpaid work exists globally. This conference would be a prestigious event to organize with the intention to motivate and offer international platform for the academicians, research scholars, industrialists, entrepreneurship, and students around the globe to share their rich experience. In this, that the key intention of this conference is provide an opportunity for participants throughout the world to share their ideas and ideologies within the all participants expected to join from the different parts of the global virtually. In addition that, the forum would be help to participants to build the new network. And also the and ICT like that, cooperative, social work. So number of themes are covered under this edited volume books. So this book is also provides the forum analyze the concept of women economic empowerment in global era. This conference will bring more insight into the above themes and theoretical background and analytical perspectives. This will enhance existing knowledge in the field of economic empowerment and women in global era. This conference is ready to academic fraternity, research scholars, and social student, industry practitioners, government officials. Finally, this conference would provide perfect platform to discuss the disseminate to innovative ideas for economic empowerment of women and may raise the few issues and challenges regarding the themes of the conference. We hopefully come out these concrete ideas. Thank you. Economic empowerment of women, global issues and challenges. Thank you, Ananda.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Professor Onkar Kakade, Vice Chancellor, Karnataka State Akkamahadevi Women's University, Vijaypur, for inaugural speech. Sir, over to you, sir.
Yeah. A pleasant and good morning to one and all. Today's chief guest and keynote speaker, Professor Rania Lampu, Vijayanagara Sri Krishnadevaraya University Registrar, Professor Tulsi Mala Madam, and all the resource persons of this webinar, our Registrar, Professor R. Sunandamma, Registrar Evaluation, Professor P.G. Tadsad, Professor Vijaya Korishetty, Dr. D.M. Madri, Dr. R.V. Gangisetti, Dr. Suresh KP, and teachers, students, and dear delegates. It is a matter of great privilege to inaugurate this 2 days virtual international conference on economic empowerment of women, global challenges, being organized by the Department of Economics, Karnataka State Akkamahadevi Women's University, Vijaypura. In the beginning, I would like to congratulate and wish all the best to the Department of Economics. My greetings to all the members of the Department of Economics. The Department of Economics happens to be one among the pioneering department of our university. It has been actively involved in academic and research endeavors since its inception in 2003. The department has successfully conducted several workshops, seminars, and conferences in the last few years. Understanding the need of the hour, the economic department of our university has organized this valuable academic program. I am extremely delighted that even in the times of coronavirus pandemic, our university's different departments, teachers have kept themselves abreast with the new technology and have been utilizing it to the full potential for the sake of student community. Women are tremendously untapped resource in many developing countries, where the problems of gender inequality are only exacerbated by lack of access to education, social constraints, poor health and sanitary conditions, and political instability. Investing in women's economic empowerment sets a direct path towards gender equality, poverty eradication, and inclusive economic growth. Women make enormous contribution to the economies, whether in business, on farms, as entrepreneurs or employees, or by doing unpaid care work at home. But they also remain disproportionately affected by poverty, discrimination, and exploitation. Gender discrimination means women often end up in insecure, low-wage jobs and constitute of a small minority of those in senior positions. It limits participation in shaping economic and social policies. And because of women perform the bulk of household work, they often have little time left to pursue economic opportunities. Research has found strong reasons to emphasize women's economic empowerment in development programs, and economic empowerment is one of the most powerful routes for women to achieve their potential and advance their rights. Since women make up the majority of the world's poor, meeting poverty reduction goals requires addressing women and their economic empowerment. Discrimination against women is economically inefficient. National economies lose out when a substantial part of the population cannot compete equitably or realize its full potential. Working with women makes good business sense. When women have the right skills and opportunities, they can help business and market growth. Women who are economically empowered contribute more to their families, societies, and national economies. It has been shown that women invest extra income in their children, providing a route to sustainable development. As interest in fostering women's economic empowerment grows, two questions arise. How is women's economic empowerment defined? What does the term women's economic empowerment encompass? How can women's economic empowerment be measured and evaluated so organizations can show they are on the right track to achieving it? However, I would like to draw attention to the economy of care as well. While it is very important to promote more women in the labor market, we should not forget that the burden of care work traditionally lies on the shoulder of women. Therefore, promotion of women's access to employment and labor market should take into considerations factors that prevent women from growing in career the same way that men can grow. I wish to echo voices of many economists and feminists that the state has a responsibility to recognize and redistribute the care. Men should share the responsibility and state must ensure to drive this change through enabling policies. The economic empowerment of women will strongly take off and sustain when women and men are of equal footing. I congratulate the Department of Economics for conducting this conference. Thank you one and all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for supporting and appreciating our department. If you always support the correct principle, then you will never get the wrong results. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your informative words. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your informative words. Due to some transport issue, so we are not unveiling the edited book today. So tomorrow at the time of valedictory, we are going to unveil the book. Thank you. And we are sorry for that issue. So now, last but the not least, once again, I take this privilege for the vote of thanks. So I thank, from my wholeheartedly, I thank for the Rania Lampo ma'am. She has joined on behalf of the department and behalf of our HOD and all the professors. I'm very thankful to you, ma'am. And and I'm very thankful to Omkar Kakade sir, behalf of me and behalf of the department, behalf of the all. I'm very thankful to you for joining, sir. And R.V. Gangshetty sir, our HOD and convener of this international conference, I'm wholeheartedly very thankful to you, sir, from our department and from me and from all. Next one is Madri sir, Dr. Professor D.M. Madri sir, convener, Department of Economics, Karnataka State, Akkamahadevi Women's University, Vijaypur. I'm very thankful to you, sir. You have joined behalf of me and behalf of the department and behalf of all. I'm very thankful to you, sir. And KP Suresha, sir, and organizing secretary of international conference. I'm very thankful to you, sir, behalf of me and department and behalf of all. And I also thank for all the resource persons and participants and dignitaries for joining, research scholars and students for joining for this international conference. Thank you one and all. The next technical issues, next session will be started by the Rania Lampo, and chief guest and keynote speaker, and Rania Lampo ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Good morning from Greece to all participants. I warmly thank you for your kind invitation, and especially I thank Dr. Binu for this honorable kind invitation to be a part of this so meaningful and resourceful conference. My name is Rania Lampo, I'm a STEM instructor. Currently, I'm working at the Greek Ministry of Education. Today, I represent Ladies of All Nations International, since I'm chairperson of this organization for Greece. My presentation will cover issues related to gender equality as a component of social justice. I will address issues related to disabled also women and migrant women workers. And last but not least, I will discuss the problems the coronavirus pandemic created in corporate businesses as far as women employees are concerned. May I share my presentation? So we live in a world of growing inequality with worsening predictions on how long it is going to take to close the gender gap. This is despite 185 countries having gender equality embedded in their constitutions, and despite the fact that 187 countries have signed the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, despite also the 51 founding members of the United Nations in 1845 approving the fine words of the UN Charter, which speak of the equal rights of men and women, putting achievement on women's rights at the heart of their work. So the world embarked on a very long journey, which is nowhere near reaching its end in 2020. It is going to take probably another 100 years to close the economic and political gender gap, and another staggering 200 years before women earn as much as men and are equally represented in the workplace. At the same time, accelerating implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals provides an important opportunity to further this progress. So according to the recent report of the World Fair Trade Organization, women make up 23% of the world's parliamentarians, 7% of heads of state, and 6% of heads of government. Women only hold 12% of board positions in businesses across the world, 9% of chief executive officer positions, and 24% of senior management roles. Women who complete their education may now be found in all professions. However, the majority of working women all over the world are in low-level jobs, in factories as farm laborers, in informal work as craft producers, street traders, and waste pickers, in services such as education, health and social care, domestic and restaurant work, in jobs which pay low wages and are not considered to be high status. Therefore, women need empowerment. It is widely recognized that empowerment is a multidimensional process encompassing changes in the political, social, and economic spheres of life, and that these different dimensions of empowerment are closely interrelated, so that significant changes in one dimension is likely to generate changes in others. Women's economic empowerment relates to the enhancement of women's capacity for strategic choice and agency in the sphere of the economy and to the possibilities this opens up for change in other spheres of their lives. Thus, it offers policymakers one of a number of possible entry points into broader processes of empowerment. So there are a number of arguments about why focus on women economic empowerment is important. First of all, it relates to the enhancement of women's capacity for strategic choice, as we said, and gender inequalities in the division of labor between paid and unpaid work, women's primary responsibility as we said, for unpaid care work, and the associated inequalities in access to valuable resources and opportunities are at the core of women's subordinate status of the society. So inequalities leave women dependent on male provision for themselves and their children, or else forced to compete in markets for their labor, goods, and services on highly disadvantaged terms. Their disadvantaged status in the marketplace, in turn, reinforces women's lack of strategic agency, both in relation to their own lives as well as the wider society. The economic empowerment of women is thus a matter of human rights and social justice. The economic empowerment of women is also critical for human development, and it matters for poverty reduction. Knowledge is an important component of empowerment, but many women in the world lack the necessary knowledge that enables them to defend workplace rights. A serious problem that is compromising the occupational situation of women is the lack of knowledge on the part of many women. So in many parts of the world, women don't know, for example, that international labor organizations like ILO, who issued recommendations for women and try to protect the rights of working people, and especially women. Here we can see a little bit the history of human rights. Human rights only emerged as a global movement during the United Nations Decade for Women, when women from many different geographic, cultural, religious, racial, and class backgrounds came together and organized to improve the status of women. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, it's a key international agreement on women's human rights, was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1979. This agreement is often described as the International Bill of Rights for Women. Its preamble and 30 articles aim to eliminate gender discrimination and promote gender equality. The Convention defines discrimination against women as any distinction, inclusion, or restriction made on the basis of sex that impedes women's human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, economic, social, cultural, civil, or any other field. It sets an agenda for national action to end such discrimination, require all parties to the Convention to take all appropriate measures, including legislation, to ensure the full development and advancement of women and guarantee their fundamental freedoms on the basis of equality with men. Here we can see a mural in Mexico, which commemorates hundreds of women who were murdered and left in the desert near that city. As of 186 United Nations member states had ratified the Convention, The Obama administration strongly supports this treaty and is committed to a USA ratification. State parties to the convention agree to incorporate principles of gender equality into their national constitutions or other appropriate legislation, to adopt appropriate measures that prohibit discrimination against women, and to establish legal protections of their rights on an equal basis with men. Then USA First Lady Hillary Clinton famously declared at the 1995 Beijing conference that human rights are women's rights, adding women must enjoy the right to participate fully in the social and political lives of the countries if we want freedom and democracy to thrive and endure. The Convention and the Beijing Declaration of a Platform for Action signaled the successful mainstream of women's rights as human rights. Although the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action are not legally binding, they do carry ethical and political weight and can be used to pursue legal, regional, and national efforts to address women's human rights. So the Convention is a treaty that is binding on each party. The principles and practices related, of course, to human rights are continuously evolving. As we said before, many women don't know about the recommendations of the International Labour Organization. Many of these recommendations regulate safety and health in the workplace, especially when women and children are concerned. For example, recommendation number 123 covers problems of women with family responsibility. It contains measures that should be taken to enable women workers to fulfill their various responsibilities harmoniously and without discrimination. Early recommendations include the lead poisoning, women and children recommendation, 1919, the white phosphorus recommendation, and the white lead painting convention. This recommendation contains specific provisions prohibiting the employment of women in certain areas and for certain processes, reflecting the concern with not endangering women workers' reproductive health. Another convention adopted 1948 prohibits night work for women in industry, but it was made more flexible through the Protocol of 1990 and the new Night Work Convention and recommendation which were adopted in 1990, now protecting both men and women against the hazardous effects of night work. From the decade of the 80s, as the focus of analysis concerning equality in general was reorientated from women to relations between women and men, the conviction gained ground that any change in the role of women should be accompanied by change in that of men and should be reflected in the greater participation in family and household duties. So a number of standards adopted more recently respond to the rapid change in the labor market and in modalities of work in the face of growing globalization from the decade of 80s onward. For example, the convention number 175 and recommendation 182 aiming at the equal treatment of full and part-time workers are important for gender equality because most part-time workers are women. The convention number 177 recommendation 184 concerning homework adopted in 1996 contribute to improving the situation of millions of home workers and a large majority of whom are women. Convention number 182 and recommendation 190 aiming at the prohibition and elimination of the worst forms of child labor also have a gender component calling for account to be taken of the special situation of girls. So several recent recommendations contain clauses referring to the importance of observing and promoting gender equality. For example, employment relationship, 2006, and domestic workers recommendation, 2011, and the recommendation about violence and harassment. All these recommendations aim to encourage member states to adopt national policies regulating the employment relationship, particularly in the case of vulnerable workers, including women workers. This is of particular importance to women workers in a typical and highly feminized types of work. So while early generalizations in the gender and development literature that female-headed households are always necessarily the poorest of the poor has been challenged by subsequent studies. These studies have also served to establish that households that rely solely or primarily on female earnings tend to be overrepresented at the lower end of the income distribution. This is not surprising. Why? Because if women have lower levels of education and skills, and if they face discrimination in markets for the sale of their goods, service, and wage labor, as well as their access to assets, technology, and financial service, their efforts to earn a living for themselves and their dependents are likely to be rewarded more unfavorably than those of men with equivalent characteristics. Conversely, lower income households with male or joint headship are very generally able to rely on women's earnings to keep their households above the poverty line or to prevent from declining into poverty in times of crisis. So it is evident that gender defines one of the durable forms of disadvantage in the economy and that this has not been eroded by women's increasing access to paid work. The striking increase in women's labor force participation in recent decades reflects a combination of forces, including rising rates of education, falling fertility, declining family size, and changing aspirations for themselves and their families that have made it both possible and desirable for women to take up paid work. Women have been pushed into the labor market by the decline in agricultural production and growing levels of landlessness, economic recession, structural adjustment programs, and the rise in the cost of living associated with the privatization of public welfare services and withdrawal of subsidies. They have also been pulled into the economy by the opportunities generated by trade liberalization and export-led manufacturing. So these processes have not been gender neutral. Not only are women crowded into limited gender-specific segments of the labor market, but these segments tend to be characterized by what the ILO organization terms calls atypical work. In the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development reports, countries, women are more likely than men to be in part-time and temporary employment. In the poorer regions of the world, where informal employment makes up between 50 and 75% of total non-agricultural employment, women are more disproportionately concentrated in informal work, both self-employed and waged. They are more likely to be in home-based or small to medium enterprises trading in specific goods. They are more likely to be classified as unpaid family workers than men. So the global, this report estimates that 25 are compared to 11, but higher percentages and wider disparities in poorer countries. The nature of constraints imposed on women are mostly institutionalized rather than individualized. So gender-specific constraints are made up of social norms, values, and beliefs which define differences between women and men in different societies, which ascribe them different roles and responsibilities on the basis of these definitions, and which generally assign a lower value to these aptitudes, abilities, and activities conventionally defined as feminine relative to those conventionally defined as masculine. So while these gender-specific norms appear to relate primarily to the intrinsically gender relationships of family and kinship, they also spell out wider societal ideologies about gender difference. They include the assignment of primary responsibility for unpaid reproductive work within the family to women, evident in many societies, along with primary breadwinning responsibility to men. They also include more specific context-specific cultural restrictions on women's movement in the public domain, taboos against women or men doing certain kinds of work or using certain kinds of technology, and gender-differentiated rules about the distribution of property and the allocation of various resources. So gender-specific constraints translate in turn into gender inequalities in the distribution of valued resources. The nature of these inequalities varies. In some countries of the world, mainly In South Asia and East Asia, they take the form of extreme forms of gender discrimination in basic survival needs, giving rise to excessive levels of female mortality and an adverse ratio of men to women in the population compared to most regions of the world. More widespread in the developing world are gender inequalities in health, education, skills, and assets, mainly in favor of men who are deemed to be the primary producers and breadwinners. So as a result, gender often intensifies the effects of other social inequalities in access to resources and opportunities. So according to the Development Progress Research Report, the factors that enable and constrain women's economic empowerment are divided into 10 direct and underlying factors. Direct factors are directly linked to women's individual or collective life experience. Underlying factors are the wider structural conditions that determine women's individual or collective life experience. So direct and underlying factors we can see here are highly, of course, interconnected with fluid boundaries. Policy and program responses should aim to develop and enabling environment. So we're talking about underlying factors, and target women individually and collectively. We're talking about direct factors. Importantly, the same factors can be either constraints or enablers. So we can see here, direct factors: education, skill development, training, access to quality, decent paid work, address unpaid care and work burdens, access to property, assets and financial services, and collective action and leadership and social protection. On the other hand, underlying factors, we have labor market characteristics, fiscal policy, legal, regulatory and policy framework, and gender norms, discriminatory social norms. So researchers suggest that women's unpaid responsibilities in the domestic domain act as a socially invisible reproductive tax on their time and mobility, restricting productive options as well as their ability to take part in civic life and political action. Unpaid work includes the care of family members, household work, as well as collection of fuel and water in contexts where these are too expensive or simply not available for purchase. While childcare remains a major aspect of women's care responsibilities, care of the elderly has become a further consideration also in countries that have undergone demographic transition. Better off women may be able to hire others to take up some of these responsibilities, but poor mothers who want to take up work must choose between various equally difficult options if they do not have any other adult women in the household. They must restrict their paid activities to less remunerative work that can be carried out near the home and on a flexible basis. They can take their children to work with them, or they can leave them alone at home or in the care of young siblings, often at the expense of the latter's education. The task force of the Millennium Development Goals of the United Nations draws attention to investments in infrastructure which reduce time burdens for women and girls. It suggests investments in energy, transport, and water sanitation as having particular importance. The provision of electricity would dramatically reduce the time that poorer women in poorer countries spend in collecting fuel and water and cooking. It would also increase the time children spend in homework and women spend earning an income or watching TV. Access to roads has been also very important because it has been found to reduce women's daily transport burdens, particularly acute in Africa, to increase the trading and other opportunities, as well as access to social services such as the health and education. Promoting women's participation, so in the design and provision of infrastructure, will not only ensure that it meets their needs, but also generates employment opportunities and voice within the community. Therefore, investing in women's economic resources helps poor households to weather crises and increases their chances of moving out of poverty. Women's economic empowerment is essential if they are to participate in, contribute to, and benefit from growth processes on terms which recognize the value of their contributions, respect their dignity, and make it possible for them to negotiate a fair distribution of the benefits of growth. It brings about a more balanced process of growth. However, this will not be achieved merely by increasing women's access to resources. We know from experience that it is possible to improve women's access to land, to jobs, to credit, and so on, in ways which are demeaning and exploitative, and do little to challenge this subordinate status within the home. We are interested in forms of access which represent a substantive expansion of women's life options and capacity of agency. This is unlikely to occur through market forces alone. There is evidence to suggest that women's economic empowerment, their access to and control over valued resources has strong positive implications for the well-being of the family, including their children's well-being. In India, Mobile Crisis is a voluntary organization that has been in existence since 1969 to meet the child care needs of women workers in the construction industry. Construction work is a major source of employment for some of the poorest and less skilled women and men in Indian cities, many of whom arrive from the countryside in search of work. Mobile Crisis has around 369 centers and reaches out to around 200,000 children across the cities of India. It approaches builders in all the potential construction sites with a view to opening a center there. The center has an infant section which looks after newborn babies and infants. Mothers are encouraged to breastfeed regularly, but if it is not possible, then milk powder is given to the infant. The Balvadi provides non-formal education for preschool children and prepares them for admission to regular schools at the right age. Along with asymmetries in the gender division of labor between paid and unpaid work, inequalities in access to and to land and property are among the most important manifestations of the structural nature of gender inequality across the world. In rural areas, women's disadvantaged status within both statutory and customary land tenure system has constituted the major barrier to women's economic empowerment. So weak rights to land also translates into weak rights in relation to other natural resources, including water and foster produce. While access to arable land is less important in urban areas, insecurity in rights to homestead land and housing underpins women's insecurity in other aspects of their lives. Inequalities in access to land and housing is also a major cause of women's decline into poverty in the event of a loss of a male breadwinner through death, divorce, or desertion, since they lose whatever benefits they might have enjoyed from their husband's ownership of land and houses. So in context, as in many parts of sub-Saharan Africa, where women farm independent parcels of land, it has been possible to establish that their productivity is at least as high as that of male farmers, but they are constrained in their access to other complementary inputs such as seeds and fertilizer. At the same time, women are more likely to invest their labor efforts in plots over which they have some degree of control. So the series of United Nations Women's Conferences, together with the passage of the Convention, have galvanized action of the question of property rights, and recent decades have actually seen a number of nations reform their constitutions and civil codes and either incorporated gender-neutral language or explicitly recognized women's rights and prohibited discrimination based on gender. Most Latin American countries passed legal reforms in the decades of 80s and 90s to remove discriminatory clauses in codes applying to family, marriage, divorce, and marital property inheritance. Also modified land allocation laws and regulations for agrarian reform and land title programs. There are similar movements also in Africa and Asia. Despite the failure of states to engage seriously with the challenge of gender equity, Whitehead and some other researchers suggest that the achievement of women's equal rights to land and property will be best achieved through the struggle to democratize the state. Another serious disadvantage for working women is the fact that they can be subjected to gender-based violence at home or at workplace. However, states have specific obligations under international human rights law to prevent, protect against, investigate, punish, and redress gender-based violence obligations that are collectively referred to as the state's due diligence obligations. An essential component of this obligation is to establish comprehensive laws and policies to prevent and punish gender-based violence. The Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women urges states to take a number of steps to address gender-based violence, including criminalizing all forms of gender-based in all spheres, public and private, and ensuring that laws addressing sexual assault encompass a marital rape, acquaintance and date rape, and other scenarios where consent is not freely given. Repealing laws that prevent or deter women from reporting gender-based violence, such as guardianship laws that deprive women of legal capacity or restrict the ability of women with disabilities to testify in court. Taking measures to prevent gender-based violence, including, for example, by addressing the root causes of such violence, such as patriarchal stereotypes, and conducting awareness-raising campaigns, providing appropriate protection and support services to victim survivors, taking all legal and other measures to provide effective protection against gender-based violence, including legal preventive and protective measures. So let's have here a look at India, where women are increasingly speaking out against sexual abuse at work, in part due to the global Me Too movement, which was founded in 2026 by the USA activist Tarana Berg, with the goal of enabling women to speak out against sexual abuse. Later, the movement became global. However, many women, particularly in the informal sector, are still constrained by stigma, fear, and retribution, and institutional barriers to justice. An example of the existing barriers to justice is the September 2020 alleged gang rape and murder of 19-year-old Dalit women in Uttar Pradesh state, highlighted both rampant violence against women in India and structural violence against poor and marginalized communities. The authorities' response illustrates the barriers women face in accessing justice. However, the 2030 POSH Act mandates employers to take steps to protect female employees from sexual harassment in the workplace and to provide procedures for resolution, settlement, or prosecution. It widened the definition of the workplace and covered the informal sector, including domestic workers. It protects all workers in any place visited by the employee during the course of her employment, including transportation. The POSH Act requires employees also to create an internal committee at each office with 10 or more employees. For other establishments with less than 10 employees, and for women working in the informal sector, the state government's district officer or collector is required to form a local committee in its district. These committees handle complaints and recommend actions ranging from a written apology to termination of employment, providing an alternative to filing a criminal complaint with police. The Indian government should stand for the rights of women, whether they are domestic workers, government seen workers, or office workers, to work in safety and dignity, said an India Justice representative. The government should coordinate with workers' organizations, right groups to address sexual harassment and violence as a key workplace issue, partner in information campaigns, and ensure that those who face abuse can get the support and remedies they deserve. Here we can see it's a very important story. It's a story of Sina Van, a child sex slave for 2 years in Cambodia, who now uses a traumatic past to save other young women and girls trapped in the same situation. Van leads the Voices for Change program for a Cambodian foundation that offers compassion, empathy, and a chance for rehabilitation into society for those victimized by sexual predators. It will be understandable if Sina Van tried to forget her real-life nightmare, being enslaved as a 13-year-old girl and forced into prostitution for 2 years in Cambodia. Girls in Van's former predicament, trapped as sex slaves, never know the difference between night and day. And through her childhood innocence was stolen from her, Van, now 25-year-old, returns often to the scene of the crime to save other girls dehumanized by the sex trade in industry. And these girls can be as young as 4 years old. So Van was rescued during a raid organized by anti-sex slavery activist Somali Mam. Somali Mam is also a sex slave survivor who documented her experience in an autobiography, The Road to Lost Innocence. The non-governmental foundation she created in 1996, called Acting for Women in Distressing Situations, has rescued more than 6,000 young women and girls since its founding. It runs large shelters in Southeast Asia for the girls' rehabilitation and return to normal lives. Van now leads Somali Mom's Voices for Change program, where she speaks out for sex slaves unable to speak for themselves. Van educates young women about the dangers of contracting HIV and other sexually transmitted diseases when they are forced to have unprotected sex with clients. Somali mom says she has seen a remarkable positive transformation in Van since mom helped police authorities rescue the Vietnamese native from the cartels. Mom's Foundation said Van's story is instructive in the global fight against sex slavery for people unaware that sex slavery is happening, for those who want to end it, and for women still trapped in brothels, and for the survivors who are emerging from the darkness and need inspiration to rebuild their lives. Van says he has learned the laws on human trafficking and has become familiar with basic counseling and psychology as part of her training. It's important to mention that Van won 2009 Frederick Douglass $10,000 prize, which is awarded by the Washington-based non-governmental organization Free the Slaves. This award is presented to those who survived a form of slavery and helps others find purpose in their lives. This award, named for a USA statesman who escaped from bondage in 1838 to become a leader in the movement to abolish slavery, emphasizes that many survivors of modern-day slavery go on to help others to freedom. Van says the award is important for all the victims and survivors of sex slavery who live around the world. She used the award to explain that we are strong to fight the sex. So, Free the Slaves maintains that widespread impoverishment of people and the resulting vulnerability, government corruption that does not protect women from the violence of enslavement drive 21st century slavery. The attention given to inequality in current policy thinking and reproduced in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development report is a welcome addition to a policy agenda that was largely driven in the decade of 80s and 90s by economic growth on one hand and $1 a day poverty reduction on the other hand. However, simply asserting the need to improve access to different markets does not adequately address the barriers that have blocked access to and participation in this market for large sections of the world's population throughout a period that has been dominated by free market ideas and practice. So it fails to confront head-on the accumulating evidence that market forces cannot, on their own, dissolve the durable inequalities in rules, norms, and assets that perpetuate the disadvantaged socioeconomic status of certain categories of the population of different countries. So markets need to reproduce such deep-seated inequalities regarding the powerful and penalizing the weak. Those who enter the market without assets must rely on their physical labor to meet their daily needs. They are seldom in a position to negotiate the price of the labor or opt for labor if they do not receive their asking price. They rarely generate a sufficient surplus from their efforts to benefit from access to land or capital markets, nor do they have the mental security of peace of mind to take the risks necessary to break out the poverty traps. By contrast, those with considerable assets at their disposal are not only in a position to determine the price at which they will engage in the market, they are also better positioned to take advantage of any new opportunities they may emerge and to close off such opportunities to those with fewer endowments. Market inequalities reproduce themselves because what underpins them are inequalities of power. So, those with power are better able to frame the rules of the game to protect their own privilege, or in many cases, to ignore the rules of the game they themselves have framed. Inequalities in resources and opportunities are most resistant to change when they represent the historical evolution of patterns of disadvantage which have been reinforced by past state policy and persisting social discrimination. What about vocational training programs? Before saying that, we can say that access to quality education during childhood is important in itself and has important spillover effects in breaking intergenerational poverty cycles, delaying marriage and childbearing, and improving labor market outcomes later in life. So encouragingly, in recent years, the majority of countries have achieved gender parity in education at the pre-primary and primary levels. But although most people believe that girls and boys should have equal access to good education, the average across 19 countries in sub-Saharan Africa was 96% in 2011, discriminatory social norms and practices, including early marriage and the gender division of household labor, reduced the access of girls. Equally, in families that do not value education, girls are more likely to marry young and to take on more domestic work. So, according to research, in 29 countries in 2015, the average share of married girls under 18 with a secondary education was 16% compared to 36% of unmarried girls. On the other hand, vocational training programs have also reproduced gender biases in the larger economy, generally favoring male occupations, carpentry, metalworking, masonry, motor mechanics, and many other efforts. Where they're available for women and girls, they tend to be restricted to traditional feminine subjects such as home economics, secretarial studies, etc., or beauty care, which are largely an extension of home-based activities and are usually poorly paid, assuming that jobs are available, of course. Even where these courses had added ICT training, women tended to be relegated to word processing while men dominated the more complex aspects. These biases in training opportunities and content are being reproduced among the younger generation in Vietnam and, of course, in other contexts. The survey of Vietnamese youth found that among 22 and 25-year, 51% of urban males had participated in vocational job training compared to 38% of females. So research reports that 40% of participants in short-term vocational training courses carried out in 1999 were women. Of the 35 occupations for which training was offered, women predominated in 9, men predominated in 16, while men and women participated equally in 10 occupations. Under these circumstances, access to vocational training is unlikely to do a great deal to improve women's productivity and opportunities for work. One study that confirms this comes from Taiwan, when researchers find that while college education increased earnings from both women and men, only men earn a premium as a result of vocational training. However, these are examples of initiatives which have sought to break with these patterns with varying degrees of success in providing portable skills and promoting new livelihoods. Poor people, including poor women, need well-designed financial services as much as the better off to tide themselves over a crisis, to respond to investment opportunities, to ensure themselves against old age, sickness, contingencies, and to pay for lump sum expenditures related to key events such as birth, marriages, and deaths, to religious or social festivals. Until the advent of microcredit programs, poor sections of the population relied on informal services, their own mutual association aid, and where this existed, government poverty reduction programs. The emergence of microcredit and the priority it gave to women in its lending programs constituted a micro-revolution of a kind because of widespread perceptions that the poor were not bankable. Microcredit consists of programs that extend small loans to very poor people for self-employment projects that generate income, allowing them to care for themselves and their families. Mohamed Yunus is credited with developing the concept and making microcredit a socially responsible, viable business model. Yunus established the Grameen Bank in 1983 in an attempt to combat extreme poverty he witnesses in the rural areas of Bangladesh. The Grameen Bank focused on lending only to poor. Microcredit programs have expanded considerably since the decade of 80s because of the compatibility with the new liberal emphasis on integrating poor people into markets, in this case through the promotion of their entrepreneurial skills. Today, there are over 7,000 microfinance institutions in the world that lend about $2 billion to over 60 million borrowers. Around 1,200 of those institutions work in Bangladesh alone, but we have also new institutions. Over time, programs have widened beyond the provision of microcredit to encompass a range of other financial services, including savings, skills development, and to a lesser extent, insurance products tailored to the need of their clients. However, while it is customary to refer to the microfinance sector, in reality, there have always been a variety of different kinds of organizations providing financial services to poor women and men. Broadly speaking, they can be divided into those who are orientated to poverty reduction and those which are concerned with financial sustainability. While the former are concerned with promoting the incomes and livelihoods of the poorest sections of the population, the latter tend to prioritize those who are able to make timely loan repayments and hence allow the organization to stay afloat. In addition, there is pressure to integrate microfinance services with mainstream financial organizations, including government and commercial banks. While this move towards mainstreaming is at one level welcome, at one other level there are questions to be raised about the extent to which and the terms on which women continue to have access to financial services they need. There has not been equivalent attention to promoting gender awareness within the mainstream financial sector that has been the case with microfinance, and there is a strong possibility that as financial service provision for the pool. However, there's a strong case for taking a continuum approach to the building of inclusive financial systems. This would recognize that not all sections of the population are best served by a single model of financial service provision, as well as that different sections of the population may need different kinds of financial services. The very poor may prioritize safety of savings before they move on to credit, and then on to a much larger range of financial products which reflect the greater ability to take risk. A continuum approach would allow for this diversity of service provision to coexist at the same time as recognizing the need for actions to promote gender equality and women's empowerment across the continuum of financial services, from addressing gender biases in the rules, norms, and practices of mainstream financial institutions to the possibility of partnerships between different kinds of organizations from public, commercial, and voluntary sectors based on the comparative advantage of each in reaching out to poor women, to the development of specific programs for harder to reach women and men. Moreover, a well-designed universal pension schemes are likely to benefit women disproportionately for a number of reasons. Men and women generally face a decline in their earning power and levels of activities in the later years of their lives, but old age does not have to be a period of greater poverty or insecurity. Family and community networks, private savings, private or social insurance, pensions, and assets of all kinds all offer forms of protection against such an eventuality. As regarding Asia, we can see some recommendation. Asia divides its many recommendations to governments into 5 sections: social benefits, decision-making, strategic planning and birth registration, access to justice, access to credit, prevention of violence against women in the workplace. So the specific recommendations for workplace are given here: regularly review wages in sectors where women are concentrated and adopt proactive and specific measures to eliminate occupational segregation, to narrow the gender pay gap, take measures to ensure that labor laws are enforced effectively, to increase the number of and adequately equipped labor inspectors to enable them to monitor women's working conditions effectively, particularly in the garment industry and other low-paid sectors, provide a regulatory framework for the informal economy, take measures to ensure that women in the informal economy are included in national labor law and are entitled to the same benefits as those in the formal economy. Raise the retirement age so that it's equal with men's in order to give women better employment opportunities, adopt legislation that defines and prohibits harassment in the workplace, ensure equal opportunities for women and men in the formal labor market, including temporary special measures aimed at eliminating occupation segregation both across sectors. As far as recommendations to government of Latin America are concerned, strengthen fair trade organization in Latin America and a critical look at the situation of women's rights and their participation in advocacy spaces. We can see here, continue, expand, and strengthen the processes of training and empowerment of women and communities, prioritize population communities that have greater difficulties in accessing training opportunities and transforming traditional practices of discrimination and violence against women in the implementation of projects and initiatives with a focus on gender and women's rights. Develop permanent training processes on issues of gender and women's rights in which men, boys, elderly people, and the community in general participate so that new actors are involved and reflection is broadened as an issue that concerns all of us in the search for more equitable relationship in everyday life, race strategies especially focused on adolescents and young men aimed at recognizing themselves and their rights, reflecting on gender stereotypes and building their life projects based on autonomy and equity, designed jointly between government entities and the community, clear and efficient attention methods to address cases of violence and discrimination, disseminate them widely. So we can also see here some other recommendations, such as promote training processes with public officers, promote citizen oversight processes that monitor the implementation of policy, strengthen the participation of women in leadership spaces, promote programs to guarantee higher levels of safety for women, design campaigns, educational materials that promote reflection on the gender stereotypes, promote the recognition of women in care work, promote strategies of collaborative work between community-based organizations and government entities, etc. Now, what are the benefits of economic empowerment? Women's economic empowerment is central to realizing women's rights and gender equality. Women's economic empowerment includes women's ability to participate equally in existing markets, their access to a control over productive resources, access to decent work, control over their own time, lives, and bodies, and increased voice, agency, and meaningful participation in economic decision-making at all levels, from the household to international institutions. Empowering women in the economy and closing gender gaps in the world of work are key to achieving the Agenda of Sustainable Development 2030 and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly Goal 5, to achieve gender equality, and Goal 8, to promote full and productive employment and decent work for all. Also Goal 1 on ending poverty, Goal 2 on food security, Goal 3 on ensuring health, and Goal 10 on reducing inequalities. When more women work, economies grow. Women's economic empowerment boosts productivity, increases economic diversification, income equality, in addition to other positive development outcomes. For example, increasing the female employment rates in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development countries to match that of Sweden does not automatically lead to reduction in gender-based inequality. Increasing women's and girls' education attainment contributes to women's economic empowerment, more inclusive economic growth, and women's economic equality is good for business. As far as the world of work is concerned, gender differences in laws affect both developed economies and women in low regions. Women remain less likely to participate in the labor market than men around the world. Women are more likely to be unemployed than men. Women are overrepresented in informal and vulnerable employment. Globally, women are paid less than men. Women bear disproportionate responsibility for unpaid care and domestic work. Unpaid care work is essential to the function of the economy, but often goes uncounted and unrecognized. Women are still less likely to have access to social protection. Of course, women are less likely than men to have access to financial institutions or have a bank account. The digital divide remains a gendered one. Women are less likely to be entrepreneurs and face more disadvantages starting businesses. Women are constrained from achieving the highest leadership positions. Violence and harassment in the world of work affects women regardless of age, location, income, or social status. About the importance about sustainable development, almost a third of women's employment globally is in agriculture, including forestry and fishing. But this may exclude self-employed and unpaid family workers, yet differences across country regions are striking. The share of women workers in agriculture is only 9% in upper middle income countries and 2% in high income countries, while agriculture remains the most important employment sector for women in low income and lower middle income countries. Women farmers have significantly less access to control over and ownership of land and other productive assets compared to their male counterparts. Women and girls suffer most from the dearth of safely managed water and sanitation. So women and girls are responsible for water collection in 80% of households without access to water on premises. Women and girls are more likely to carry the burden of energy poverty and experience the adverse effects of lack of safe, reliable, adorable, and clean energy. environmental degradation and climate change have disproportionate impacts on women and children. Women often bear the brunt of coping with climate-related shocks and stresses or the health effects of indoor and urban pollution, which add to their care burden. As land, forest, and water resources are increasingly compromised, privatized, or grabbed for commercial investment, local communities and indigenous peoples, particularly women whose livelihoods depend on them, are marginalized or displaced. So globally, women are 14 times more likely than men to die during a disaster. Women migrant workers. Women constitute approximately half of the 258 million migrants who live and work outside their countries of birth. Migrant women and girls outnumber men and boys in all regions except Africa and Asia. In some countries of Asia, men migrants outnumber women by about 3 to 1. Despite gender inequalities in the labor market and the gender wage gaps globally, women migrant workers were responsible for saving half of the estimated $600 billion in remittance worldwide. Research has shown that women migrant workers are often more likely than men to remit on a regular basis, owing to women's stronger links to family members and self-insurance motives. Although many migrant women are highly skilled and well-educated, they face challenges in accessing foreign labor markets. Employment restrictions for migrants coupled with the de-skilling prevalent in general labor markets and pervasive stereotypes associated with migrant women in the countries of destination can negatively impact their job prospects. Indeed, many migrant women participate in low-skilled and precarious jobs characterized by low wages, poor working conditions, limited labor and social protections, of course, and exposure to physical and sexual violence. So women migrant workers are often concentrated in informal, low-paid and unregulated work. The main sectors in which women migrant workers are employed are service and retail, elementary occupations, craft and related trades. Of the estimated 11 million international migrants domestic workers in 2013, approximately 73% were women. What about women in disabilities? Another group of women who need special protection are women with disabilities. Except for the economic and social challenges, this group has to face difficult health problems that need to be addressed with appropriate health care. The key considerations enumerated here identify common barriers to accessing health services by women and young persons with disabilities who are victims of gender-based violence. Guidance is needed. So for ensuring that right-based health services tailored to the specific needs and experiences of gender-based victims with disabilities are available, accessible, acceptable, and of good quality. During emergencies, some service providers and support staff may conclude that women and young persons with intellectual disabilities lack the capacity to benefit from services. Thus, services are not developed or offered to women and young persons with intellectual disabilities despite their documented need. Here we can see an example. The Illinois Imagine Safe Picture Guides are good examples of picture guides that increase gender-based violence health service accessibility. This collection of picture guides was developed to assist women with disabilities to better understand the sexual assault examination process. The period between ages 10 and 24 is a pivotal time of development for any person and no less for those with disabilities. So during that period, girls and boys experience puberty and go through significant physical, mental, and emotional changes. Throughout this development period, young persons with disabilities are just as likely to become sexually active as their peers without disabilities and to form intimate relationships. Yet young persons with disabilities are often excluded from a comprehensive sexuality education or other educational programs that can empower them to develop healthy relationships or to recognize and report gender-based violences. So here we can see some key considerations. So a lack of participation by young persons with disabilities in the development of national plans and policies. Young persons with disabilities are at heightened risk for harmful practice such as child marriage and virgin rape. Parents, guardians, or other caregivers can be overprotective and may not want young persons with disabilities who are in their care to participate in comprehensive sexuality education programs for fear that will increase their sexual activity. Stereotypes or misperceptions that young persons with disabilities are asexual or that they do not have intimate relationships can prevent service providers and support staff from identifying them as having needs relating to gender-based violence. Inadequate training, counseling, financial support, and the care for families and caregivers of young persons with disabilities can exacerbate risks of violence. Young persons with disabilities may fear institutionalization if they report abuse by family members or caregivers, which can deter them from reporting violence. Young persons also often lack a way to communicate privately with gender-based service providers and support staff and may have concerns about the confidentiality of their conversations. So adolescents, especially marginalized adolescents, like those with disabilities, are at increased risk of gender-based violence during humanitarian emergencies due to the increased risk of sexual exploitation and abuse, lack of sexual and reproductive health services during humanitarian emergencies. Another example is that UNICEF, of course, UNICEF has successfully utilized technology information to spread information and empower young persons using U-Report in Uganda. U-Report is a free SMS social monitor tool designed to engage users in issues they care about. For example, one female user in Uganda reported that she had used the platform to share her experience of being raped with other U-Reporters, which allowed the girl and her peers on the platform to encourage one another and offer support. U-Report has also been used to improve access for girls with disabilities to education, to promote self-acceptance, and to create peer networks between young persons with and without disabilities. Another great example is of the Women's Refugee Commissions and Child Funds Toolkit for Child Protection Actors, which was designed for humanitarian development staff to strengthen capacity in disability inclusion, identify gender-based violence needs, and engage children with and without disabilities in problem planning, implementation, and monitoring. What are the key considerations? Law and policies that restrict the parental rights of women with disabilities can deter them from accessing maternal and newborn health services. Women with disabilities frequently encounter substandard care, including discrimination, abusive treatment when accessing maternal and newborn health services. Women with physical disabilities are often told they must give birth by cesarean section, despite the fact that this is not always necessary, leading to overuse of surgical procedures. Women with disabilities often lack access to information about maternal and newborn provision, and materials about maternal and newborn health are regularly unavailable in alternative formats. Several factors, including disability, gender, language, culture, age, sexuality, and negative attitudes held by service providers and support staff, can contribute to communication barriers. So we can see another example here. Experience and Health Handbook for Women with Disabilities offers a range of practical suggestions for home delivery in low-resource settings on how women with a range of disabilities can make the birth process easier. An example called the Disabled Women's Network and Resource Organization in Uganda developed a program to target discrimination barriers pregnant women with disabilities faced in accessing healthcare. So through workshops and doctors, through works with doctors and midwives, the program succeeded making hospital wards more accessible through physical modifications, attitudinal changes, and training midwives in sign language. The program followed up the project with a campaign to educate the women with disabilities about the services. Another example important is the project called Reducing Maternal Mortality Indicators in Mexico, aimed to improve maternal health among indigenous people in Mexico. The project utilized the following key strategies for combating maternal mortality: to promote the intercultural approach through integration of traditional institutional medicine, to promote communication participation, to enhance organizational development in support of the initiative. Another example is the Center for Developmental Disability Health in Australia produced a useful guide titled Supporting Women, Information and Resources for Career Supporting Women with Intellectual Disabilities to Manage Their Menstruation. Here you can see some considerations. Communication barriers can deny women and adolescent girls with disabilities access to essential counseling and psychological support. Physical barriers to both healthcare facilities effectively deny women and adolescent girls with disabilities access to essential and life-changing services. And formal and informal user fees for healthcare facilities and the cost of transportation can make preventive healthcare financially inaccessible for these women. So to make problems worse, the COVID pandemic had even more negative consequences in the financial well-being of many women around the world. As a result, more than 1 in 4 women are contemplating what many would have considered unthinkable just 6 months ago, downshifting their careers or leaving the workforce completely. This is an emergency for corporate America. This is our example here. So far, the advancement and the representation of women in the corporate world has been modest. The pandemic made it even worse. Companies risk losing women in leadership and future women leaders and unwitting years of painstaking progress toward gender diversity. Thus, as many as 2 million women are considering leaving the workforce. These women feel forced to leave the workplace. We will end up with fewer women in leadership and far fewer women on track to be future leaders. So all the progress we have seen over the past 6 years could be erased. The financial consequences could be significant. According to the Women in the Workplace report that covers the effects of the COVID on the USA working women and the need for both companies and individuals to help deter women from exiting the workforce, company profits and share performance can be close to 50% higher than when women are well represented at the top. Beyond that, senior level women have a vastly meaningful impact on a company's culture. They're more likely than senior level men to embrace employee-friendly policies and programs and to champion racial and gender diversity. More than 50% of senior level women say they consistently take a public stand for gender and racial equity at work, compared with about 40% of senior level men. And they're more likely to mentor and sponsor other women. 38% of senior level women currently mentor or sponsor one or more women of color, compared with only 23% of senior level men. So if women leaders leave the workforce, women at all levels could lose their most powerful allies and champions. Here we can see another important consideration that senior level women are much more, according to research, likely to practice allyship. And that means that women are more likely to fight injustice and promote equity in the workplace through supportive personal relationships and public acts of sponsorship and advocacy. Allies endeavor to drive systemic improvements to workplace policies, practices, and culture. So in this way, employees are happy with the job, more optimistic about their company's commitment to gender and racial equality, and less likely to consider downshifting their career. They're also more comfortable sharing challenges with managers and co-workers, which gives companies visibility to make changes that improve employees' experiences. This is a positive cycle. The more employees can bring their whole selves to work, the more the workplace will work for them and everyone. In a society where customers, employees, and investors increasingly see equity and inclusion as not just a nice to have, but a must have, allyship by organizations, senior leaders has become essential. Here we can see a graph, as we can see here, women, 63% of women, and in comparison to 42% of men that practice, this is a difference how women practice allyship more than men. Not surprisingly, senior level women are significantly more likely than men at the same time to feel burnout, under pressure to work more, and as though may have to be always on. And there are 1.5 times more likely than senior level men to think about downshifting their role because of COVID. Almost 3 in 4 cite burnout as the main reason. Here we can see also the graph. The crisis also represents an opportunity, because if companies make significant investments in building a more flexible and empathetic workplace, and there are signs that this is starting to happen, they can retain the employees most affected by today's crisis and nurture a culture in which women have equal opportunity to achieve their potential over the long term. However, fewer companies have taken steps to adjust the norms and expectations that are most likely responsible for employee stress and burnout. Less than a third of companies have adjusted their performance review criteria to account for the challenges created by the pandemic, and only about half have updated employees on their plans for performance reviews and their productivity expectations during COVID. That means that many employees, especially parents and caregivers, are facing the choice between falling short of pre-pandemic expectations that may now be unrealistic or pushing themselves to keep up at an unsustainable pace. 1 in 3 mothers have considered leaving the workforce without shifting their careers because of COVID. Given the enormous challenges mothers are facing at work, 2 things should come as no surprise. Many mothers are considering, as we said before, downshifting their career, and among mothers who are thinking about setting a majority aside childcare responsibilities as a primary reason. You can see the graph. Another factor of disempowerment in modern society is race. Women who belong to a racial group that doesn't enjoy the same privileges as other racial groups in society are twice disadvantaged. As a result, Black women are facing huge barriers to advancement. Now, in addition to the heightened pressures that Black women who are mothers and senior leaders are experiencing, they are also dealing with distinct issues because of their race. The COVID crisis has disproportionately affected Black people, and incidents of violence towards Black people in the United States have exacted a heavy emotional and mental toll on Black women. On top of all this, many Black women do not feel supported by managers and co-workers. So they're less likely than women of other races and ethnicities to say the manager advocates for new opportunities for them. And they have fewer interactions with senior leaders, which means they often don't get the sponsorship and advocacy they need to advance. Given these challenges, it's not surprising that Black women are less likely than employees of other races to report that they have equal opportunity to advance at work. We can see another graph. The Black women often don't feel comfortable bringing their whole selves to work. And at the beginning of 2020, the presentation of women in corporate America was trending in the right election. This was most pronounced in senior management, but women remained dramatically underrepresented, particularly women of color, and numbers were slowly improving. Here we can see since 2015, we have seen only modest signs of progress in the representation of women in the corporate pipeline. This is a graph that shows that the situation in the corporate business world has always been unfavorable to women as far as senior management is concerned. And still, we can see that the broken rank is still holding women back. Despite gains for women in leadership, the broken rank was still a major barrier in 2019. For the 6th year in a row, women continue to lose ground at the first step up to manager. For 100 men promoted to manager, only 85 women were promoted, and this gap was even larger for some women. Only 58 Black women and 71 Latinas were promoted. As a result, women remained significantly outnumbered in entry-level management at the beginning of 2020. For the sixth year in a row, the underrepresentation of women in color in senior management cannot be explained by attrition alone. So here we can see 6 key areas where companies should focus or expand their efforts: make work more sustainable, reset norms around flexibility. Companies must adjust their goals to the new normal. They can find creative ways to give employees extra time off. Companies should setting new work norms. Companies could also encourage employees to set their own boundaries and take full advantage of flexible work options. Even when these options are available, some employees worry there may be a stigma attached to using them. Therefore, leaders can model flexibility in their own lives, which sends a message to employees that it's okay to take advantage of flexible work options. And when employees believe senior leaders are supportive of their flexibility needs, they are less likely to consider downshifting their careers or leaving the workforce. So moreover, remote work will open up opportunities for existing employees, particularly mothers, caregivers, and people with disabilities. Take a closer look at performance reviews. Performance reviews are an important part of running an effective organization and rewarding employees for their contribution. It's important also to take steps to minimize gender bias because the pandemic may be amplifying biases women have faced for years, higher performance standards, harsher judgment for mistakes, and penalties for being mothers for taking advantage of flexible work options. To mitigate the biases that women are up against, companies need to make sure that employees are aware of them. Leaders and employees should speak publicly about the potentially outsized impact of bias during COVID. Bias training can also help. In the past year, just 1 in 4 employees have participated in unconscious-based training, and even employees who have participated in the past would benefit from a refresher. And of course, important to adjust policies and programs to better support employees. Strengthen employee communication. Of course, open and frequent communication with employees is critical, especially in a crisis when employees are surprised by decisions that have an impact on their work, and they're 3 times more likely to be unhappy in their job. Yet 1 in 5 employees have consistently felt uninformed or in dark during COVID. This suggests that companies should share more regular updates on the state of the business and key decisions that affect the employees' work and lives, and they should directly address what difficult news means for employees. General recommendations ensure policies to overcome women's unequal access. Ensure that women and girls with disabilities who are victims have access to medical, as we said before, accurate information and biased counseling on the availability of emergency contraception. It's essential to tailor gender-based violence prevention strategies to the specific vulnerabilities that young persons with disabilities face, develop, support, and engage organizations, peer supports, ensure maternity waiting homes that are available. Maternity waiting homes can help minimize the risk of complication for rural women and adolescent girls with disabilities. Offer and foster emotional support during pregnancy tailored for women and adolescent girls with disabilities. Community groups, peer support groups, or community counselors can be a valuable source of support to women and adolescent girls. And train mid-level service providers, ensure abortion services, create model programs to help providers better serve women. So it's important to achieve gender equality agreements, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and its optional protocol, the Beijing Platform for Action, the Cairo Program of Action, the Millennium Declaration, the outcome of the UN Conference on Sustainable Development, and agreed conclusions of the Commission on the Status of Women. State and non-state actors, including international financial institutions, must respect the fundamental human rights, principles of universality, indivisibility, interdependence, participation, accountability, equality, and non-discrimination. States must ensure the progressive realization of human rights for all by using the maximum of their available resources. So enact the policies to overcome women's unequal access to economic livelihood opportunities and formal employment, including by promoting equal pay for equal work, ensuring freedom from discrimination, combating gender labor market segregation, shifting tax structures, providing incentives for employers, enforcing labor rights, improving the quality and distributing unpaid work, and ensuring full employment, decent work, and the living wage of all. Moreover, we should ensure the full and equal participation of women in all public and private decision-making, including the economic, legal, social, and political life of their communities and control over finance resources. Take temporary special measures to secure equality of outcomes that address both the public and private spheres of women's lives, and build affirmative action policies to ensure women from excluded communities. So a light at the end of the too long tunnel. On 24 October 1975, 3 months later, 3 months after the close of the UN Women's Conference in Mexico, 90% of the women of Iceland went on strike for a day. They refused to go to work, to cook, to clean, or look after the children. There was a chaos. What Icelandic women were doing was calling on men to respect their work and demanding equal pay. So in January 2018, Iceland became the first country in the world to make companies prove that they are not paying women less than men for the same work. They will be fined if they cannot. So companies and government agencies with more than 25 staff must obtain a government certification of the equal pay policies. It took 42 years. This was my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any question, I am at your disposal.
No matter where you are in life, inspire and empower the woman around you. Success is sweeter than shared. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your informative words. Now I welcome Professor B.K. Tulsimala, ma'am, Registrar, Vijayanagara Sri Krishna Devaraya University, Bellary. Bellary. Ma'am is previously working in Mysuru University. Ma'am is well renowned in the field of research, projects and policy making of government and in the field of human development index, gender index, gender inequality index, child development index, food security index, urban development index, and ma'am is also working in the field of government policy making, and ma'am is also well known in the subject of Indian economy, development economics, and she is a member of several committees, and ma'am is published national and international publications, and ma'am has written various books, edited books, and as well published. Wholeheartedly welcome you, ma'am, for this international conference, and we are sorry for the delay. We are extremely sorry for the delay, ma'am. And now ma'am will speak, share his ideas on gender gap in achievements and global issues in attaining sustainable development in organized sector. Dr. Bharti Ganiger, Assistant Professor of Education, Department of Education, KSAWUV, is a reporter of this technical session. I welcome to the Dr. Bharti Ganiger, ma'am. Over to Tulsimala, ma'am.
Thank you for your generous introduction. First of all, greetings to all Indian delegates on the occasion of 71st Constitution Day. And I would like to congratulate Karnataka State Akkamahadevi Women's University in general and Department of Studies and Research in Economics in particular for organizing this international conference on economic empowerment of women, global issues and challenges. It is very, very timely and also relevant, particularly in the context of the COVID pandemic.
Suggestions which I have considered from the paper. The government and the NGOs have to motivate them to get all the hygienic facilities. Nationalist bank running self-employment training education must extend their services to rural area to promote more women workers in unorganized sector self-employment training programs. The Unorganized Welfare Association must organize general health camps twice in the year as the women construction workers are working 24/7. The construction employer must provide all the facilities in order to protect their health. There should not be any discrimination on the basis of race, sex. Equal salary should be given to the equal work given to them. Better sanitization facility must be provided. And to conclude, unorganized laborers feature those workers who do not be able to organize themselves in calling of their common interest owing to certain constraints like casual and undetermined nature of work, negligence and illiteracy, small size of establishment. They are working under an environment which is unsecured. The scenario only can be changed with the government intervention by implementing the policy strictly. Accurate action has to be taken against all those who plague the employees. The stand of the women only can be improved when major transformation in the society occurs, and that can be achieved by cognitive transformation. Thank you, Vanandra.
Thank you, Kavya Hegde. So thank you, Ms. Kavya Hegde and Mr. Venkatesh Nayak. The next presentation will be by Santosha. They are raising their hands. So please unmute Santosha. Suresh sir. Organizers.
Start. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. The topic COVID-19 psychological issues and the reactions of women in rural area. Presenting by Sanjana Eri. I am student of BCom final year, MSc College, Hamsbagh. Guided by Mr. Santosh C, HOD and Assistant Professor of Department of Economics, MSc College, Hamsbagh. Now I am going to presenting my topic in a stepwise introduction. Before we are going to our objectives and hypothesis, we should know introduction of my topic. WHO reported that due to pandemic, lockdown, social isolation, and loneliness causes to poor mental health, stress, anger, and depression faced by child, adult, and also old peoples. For example, the wage of degree completion and gives certain about their future career. It means due to pandemic, the majority of the people they're facing psychological problems because the reason they don't have work, income, job, and also they don't have freedom to go outside. So they are not getting more entertainment of women's. Review of literature. The earlier research articles are reviewed based on the objectives. A few review of literature reviewed articles are following below. For purpose my study, I have studied previous research papers and websites, newspapers, and I have found that so there is a rise impact on women's due to pandemic. So finally, we conclude our research. Objectives. The main objectives of the study pointed below. First one, to trace out physical impact of COVID-19 on women in the study area. Second one, to examine health issues and status of impact on women in the study area. Hypothesis. Impact of COVID-19 on women has created several physical problems. Second one, there is a negative psychological impact on women in the study area. Methodology. The present study is purely based on primary data, sources only. The primary data has collected through well-prepared online questionnaire schedule. The sample size of the study is 90 respondents has selected randomly in Badgi and Rattihalli Taluk of Haveri district, Karnataka. The primary data has collected from September 3rd to October 3rd, 2020. Then more important is that data has analyzed with the help of basic satisfied tools and suitable graphs. Findings. Based on the above discussion, analyze the findings are noted below. 92% of respondents strongly opinioned have faced several physical problems due to pandemic, and 40 respondents felt more stress due to children's and more workload. The study area 68% of respondents faced more problems like food, health, finance, job, and so on. 86.6% of respondents lost their jobs, and it increased more stress in lockdown time. The study area 94.4% of respondents felt off about their children due to closing school and colleges. 87.7% of respondents are highly depending on their family due to lost their jobs. The study also concludes the hypothesis like there is a negative physical impact on women and impact of COVID-19 on women has created several physical problems in the study area. Finally, Badgi respondents are facing more physical problems than Rattihalli Taluk. Suggestion. Based on the above findings, following suggestions are maintained below. First one, the government should take proper action and policies to make reduce impact on COVID-19. The family members should maintain coordination between, and also they should encourage each of them to come out from physical problems. Finally, we conclude. Throughout the early stage of the COVID-19 outbreak in Haveri district, the result showed that majority of respondents facing several physical impact with stress, anxiety, and depression. Thank you.
Madam, 1 minute. Actually, we in a bus session nearly 7 students they are accepted our paper. So if you give permission, same ID will be present.
Sir, we will talk to the organizers because continuously your name is on. I mean, the students of your college are only there in the first presentation. We'll give chance to the people from some other like states like Andhra Pradesh and all. After that, if time permits, we will allow you. Is it okay, sir?
Yeah, okay, madam. Thank you.
Yeah. Now the next presentation is Dr. Pesla Peter. Please unmute Dr. Pesla Peter from Andhra Pradesh.
Hello.
Huh?
Madam, is it audible, madam?
Yes, yes. Dr. Pesla Peter, no?
Yes, madam.
Okay, sir. Carry on, sir.
I am Dr. Yes, madam. I am Dr. Pesla Peter. Would like to present on women fetching water, sanitation, and hygienic practices in Galjopura village, Karnataka district in Andhra Pradesh. Water is very important commodity for drinking and other uses in day-to-day life in human being. Without water, survival is very difficult. In rural areas, most of the women only fetch the water for different purpose and different sources. The season-wise water requirement will be changed. In winter, water consumption may be low as compared to summer season. During summer season, people may drink more water. In rural areas, sir, sharing etla koncham chupistara. Idi sharing petandi. Idi sharing gana.
Network paita ಏನು?
ಇಲ್ಲ ಅವರು ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ.
In rural areas, people are fetching water from different sources like house connection, household tap connection, PT tap, public stand post, hand pump, community well, bore wells, and etc. And water fetches for different purpose like drinking, cooking, domestic, toilet, and livestock. In rural areas, majority of the women work in domestic work. See that? Sharing. The domestic work is depends upon the socio-economic conditions of the rural households. In rural areas, due to scarcity of water, different sources of water, people will fetch the water. In similar ways, still large section of the people are not having own toilet. Due to this reason, they are practicing open defecation. And the open defecation places are agriculture field. Open sir. Slide number 4 better. According to my observation, toilet is very useful for all people, whether female or male. The hygienic practices are also very important for human being in day-to-day life. After using toilet or washing hands with soap is good for the human being. Every day taking bath helps to the human body to grow appropriate manner. The bath will refresh the mind and it will work very fast. Taking everyday bath is very important for children growth. Due to this reason, after 1 year, children will take bath twice in a day. That is morning and evening. In a similar way, taking bath every day is important for women and men. The hygienic practices depends upon individual socio-economic condition, education, and behavior of the people. In the light of above discussion, the study wants to know who fetch the water from different sources and who is the access of sanitation, facilities, and hygienic practice of women in study village. Current paper data is a part of vast project Hyderabad. Initially, the study primary data collected census data 1,385 households during 2009-10. Then again, the studies selected randomly 50 households and gave priority to community. Hence, the study has chosen 50 total sample households. The study Garigarpur village comes under Karnataka district, district of Andhra Pradesh. In the village, different social groups like other caste people, backward and scheduled caste, scheduled tribe people were living together at the time of our investigation. But the study selected randomly OC, BC, SC, ST households. The conclusion of the study is, in the light of above discussion, the study finds some important points mentioned under below. The average male size is higher as compared to female, but the caste-wise male average family size is higher in OC and ST households. In contrary, that female average size is higher in SC caste and BC caste. Among the castes, the family size is higher in downtrodden community. The study observed that the average income is very low in ST households. Our sample, all households are having one house at the time of our investigation. Majority of them having Akka houses and followed by semi-Akka and Kacha houses. Only OC community people are having large farmers, and there are no large farmers in BCs and SC, STs. The water is fetching different purpose like cooking, domestic, toilet, and livestock. In our study village, majority of them fetched water from the other sources like canal, ponds, and rivers. Majority of the women fetch the drinking water. That is, majority of the means 76% of the women are fetching the water drinking purpose, and 24% of the men are fetching. For the cooking and food, for the cooking food, good water is required. Generally, in our study village in particular, but in cooking purpose, 87% of the women fetch the water. In similar way, majority of the fetched water from other sources. For domestic purpose, majority of the women fetched the water during our study period. The study major observation is women fetched the water in cooking and domestic purpose. In our study, 52% of they did not have owning toilet, and due to this reason, they did not use toilet but they went open defecation. For toilet purpose, men fetched the water is higher than the woman. 100% of AC men fetch the water for toilet purpose, and followed by BC and AC. In caste-wise, women fetch more for toilet purpose, and those are OCs. In this component, women practicing participation is significant. 80% of them did not have livestock. Due to this reason, they did not fetch the water. Nearly 54% of the household did not have owning toilet, but 46% of the household were having toilet. Majority of the households were having single-pied toilet, and single-pied toilet is higher in SC, ST, BC. Out of 23 households, 21 households women use toilet. In caste-wise, 100% of OC and BC households use toilet. It indicates that in downtrodden women did not use toilet and may be practicing open defecation in their village. Nearly 58% of the women practice open defecation in their village due to lack of toilet and awareness. 69% of the women was taking bath every day. Caste-wise, OC 8%, BC 70, women taking bath every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, sir. Due to network issue, I think he is unable to connect properly. So I'll give another chance to some participant. After that, we are going to conclude this first session. And shall I call Shri Sunita from Vijayawada? Is Sunita ready now? Organizers? Sunita is ready. She is saying that, present now.
Okay. Hello.
Thank you, dear participants, for your reflections and some research studies. Now I'd like to, sorry for not giving opportunity for some students here, because we have given opportunity for the people who are coming from out of the station. Again, we will give you, if time permits, we will give you opportunity for presentation in the next technical session. So stay tuned with us. And now we'll hand over to our respect by again giving some light on gender gap in achievements and issues and attaining sustainable development in unorganized sector. Over to you now, ma'am. Madam, unmute ಮಾಡಿ. Okay.
ಎಲ್ಲರದು ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟೇಷನ್ ಆಯ್ತಾ?
Madam, students continuously ಅವರೇ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. So we have given presentation for the 4 members and remaining are not there, ma'am. Some second session ಅವರು ಈಗ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂತಿದ್ದಾರೆ. So we will give opportunity them in the second session itself, ma'am.
Okay. So now it's a time to close the session.
Yeah, ma'am. You can conclude, ma'am, now.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for this opportunity, and I would like to congratulate all the paper presenters for their interesting presentations. But I noticed that there were no papers on gender gaps in achievements, though the theme is on gender gaps in achievements. It's a very, very serious area of concern, because with every increase in the rate of literacy, skill acquisition, and also participation, we have noticed growing gender gaps in achievements. It takes us to one interesting question. So what are the factors that cause and also widen these gender gaps in achievements across the sectors? It may be agriculture, industry, service, health, education, finance, whatever it may be. So under these circumstances, we have to focus on initiation of short-term measures as well as long-term measures, individual initiatives as well as institutional initiatives in order to bridge this gap. And it is also a matter of concern that, so all these days we haven't prepared our women in order to make use of the available opportunities. All of a sudden, because of new economic policy, there were many opportunities, but all these days we did not prepare our women in order to make use of these opportunities. As a result, there was growing gap with respect to achievements between these two genders. Gap, it is absolutely necessary. Under these circumstances, gender mainstreaming across the sectors appears to be very viable and also feasible. For example, in agriculture, there is feminization of agriculture. More than 80% of women, they are concentrated in agricultural sector. So how about mainstreaming them? How about capacity building in agricultural sector? So in this way, when we think of local level contextualized initiatives in order to mainstream them in the concerned sector, under such circumstances, it may be possible to narrow the gap. It may not be possible to eliminate the gap. At least we can narrow down the gap. And it is also a matter of concern that there is heavy concentration of women in unorganized sector. So there is phenomenal expansion in unorganized sector, whether we like it or not, because of market forces or because of some policy initiatives, there is phenomenal expansion. And there is also concentration of women in this unorganized sector. But in unorganized sector, the quality of job, the working conditions, even minimum facilities, they are absent. So therefore, local level initiatives are absolutely necessary in order to safeguard, in order to protect women workers. And also formalizing this informal sector, this kind of initiatives can be thought at local level. If this is not done, so there is gradual informalization of the whole economy, and we have noticed that the share of organized sector is reducing to the advantage of unorganized sector under these circumstances. So quality job, equal pay, or equality, all these things, they may become distant dream. So therefore, particularly in the context of this pandemic, given its all adverse implications, so local level initiatives, contextualized initiatives, and capacity building at different levels, so they are absolutely necessary. So with these few remarks, so I declare that, so I have closed this session. Once again, I congratulate all the paper presenters and I request them to sustain their interest, and I wish all the success to this seminar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for your valuable time spending with us in providing a valuable notes on gender gap in achievements and other issues in our 2 days virtual international conference. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your scholarly words, ma'am. Thank you so much on behalf of our university department and on my personal behalf. Thank you so much, ma'am. Namaste.
Thanks, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Tulsi Mala, ma'am, and thanks for the Bharti Gandhir, ma'am, also, and also thank you so much for participants who are presented paper very well. And next session will be start after lunch at 2:30. Please.